Do you get pissed off when you have something that you really like and then they go ahead and change it and add all these unnecessary bells and whistles and just doodads and it's just big and bulky and clunky and you don't even want to use it anymore and it was perfect before and now it's just absolutely terrible. Well, you're in luck because, we feel the same way. And on top of that, that's what we're going to be talking about in this episode of the Existential Stoic podcast.
That's it. We were
I'm
just
Randy.
venting.
That's Danny. This is the Existential Stoic Podcast. What's up, Danny?
What's up, Randy?
Yeah, so just before recording, we were actually about to start another episode that'll be the episode that comes up next week. But
Yeah.
we were
This
talking
is how these
about
ideas happen.
how, some software updates and then things that were easy and simple and we knew how to use all of a sudden just where did
Well,
things go?
you do see it all the time. And the example I was giving, I think a lot of people will probably know this one is Evernote. When it first came out, lots of people used that app. And I remember using it when it first came out. It was a great app originally.
It was like the
But then
first cloud note-taking app, pretty
yes, that was,
much.
and it was simple. It was
Yeah.
really simple when it first came out. I don't remember having a lot of features, but it was like, I guess because competition came out, like so somebody saw that and they were like, we could add this feature. So and then Evernote just started like doing all this stuff, and it just got so bloated that it was like, I got this because it was a note app, right? Now you've made it into this thing to do everything. It's like I don't want an everything app. I want a note app.
And it
Like,
lost its functionality as a note app. Like I remember I was getting
yeah.
so frustrated at just being a note app that it didn't work for what I initially got it for. And it was just but market share and investors and
But dude,
shareholders, all that.
yeah, everything's like that though. It's like it's weird. It's like we can't even when we make something good, like we don't leave it alone, you know? It's we have to keep because I think that maybe is part of it, right? That the way our market's set up is like there's this impulse that like you can't just have a product that stays stagnant. It has to keep developing, changing, or people won't use it. Like, and it's a shame because I would have been happy with Evernote if they never changed it. All they could have done was like security updates and like updates for like new hardware and stuff. But other than that, just leave it
Well,
as is.
I mean, I notice this a lot too. You see all these car companies trying to cover every model of car. Like now Lamborghini has an SUV and it's just like, and Porsche has an SUV. And it's like, why on earth would
That's
you buy
not
a Porsche or a Lamborghini SUV? That's the most stupid thing, in my opinion. But
Yeah, because they
it's the
have
most
nothing.
stupid
Well, they
thing.
have nothing to do
Yeah,
with those types of vehicles. Their brand has nothing to do with them.
yeah,
Like, and if you were gonna do it, make another brand and then do it from there. Don't make it. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's like the biggest waste of money, in my opinion, again, to buy one of those because like Porsche is known for a sports car. Lamborghini is known for a supercar. It's like not, it's just crazy. Yeah.
And I mean, and even their regular supercars really are an insane purchase in terms of cost. Yeah, it's
Hmm.
just it is funny though, but it's that idea I think that you have to have like I don't know, we always seem to think that more is better. And I think that is the problem. Like we forget that like there's a value in simplicity, right? And knowing what to expect, knowing what's going to be there.
You just talked about value of simplicity, already bringing us back to the topic at hand.
Yeah, trying to
Wow.
keep us on track.
Well, it's interesting because I think you hit the nail on the head earlier where you're talking about how like everything has to keep growing and expanding and getting bigger. And that's not the way that things have always been. Like
It's
before
also
you
not
did some
sustainable
well,
at all.
it's interesting because like in terms of business, which everybody thinks is the best thing because we all worship at the altar of money, business is the greatest thing ever. You always need to have every quarter needs to be better than the last, always growing. And it's like there are no natural things that grow forever except for cancer. And
Yeah.
like we have
Yeah.
wars on cancer and everybody's fighting cancer. And it's like, but in business, this is really good. And it's like, but is it? Maybe
You know,
it's
it's funny. There's a philosopher, God, I can't remember his name right now. He's the guy who created so, social ecology, it's environmental ethics
oh, okay.
approach. I can't remember his name, but he talks about the idea of grow or die. This concept in our business practices where like if a business is not growing, it's failing, right? Like you
Hmm.
can't have a business that's just performing well. It has to constantly be maximizing, 10xing. And what he talks about is like how that is such well in his in the context of the environment, right? How it's unsustainable and how it leads to monopolization and how it leads to predatory behavior because you just keep right? You just have to keep growing. So you're willing to do anything and just waste stuff constantly. Instead of building like something good, they build stuff to break, they build stuff and they just keep buying other companies and all this stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. That made me think of something because I've heard like Tony Robbins talk about this thing also, how you're either growing or you're dying. And it's just like
Yeah.
maybe that's true, but there are cycles in life. You can't always be growing unless you're a Cancer. And
Yeah.
so like in order, yeah, there's like an ebb and a flow. And in the Tao Te Ching, it talks about it all the time. There's a season for everything. And so
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
sometimes you do need to grow, but then sometimes you don't need to grow. You need to shrink. And it's just like we vilify this whole shrinking. Like, if you're not happy, if you're depressed, if you're anxious, all these things, like they're terrible. And how, oh my gosh, we need to
Yeah.
fight depression, fight cancer, fight anxiety, fight this. And it's just like,
Fight everything.
yeah, well, maybe. Yeah.
But no, you know what I hate about so no, it's a good point though, like the mental health stuff too, is like what I hate about so much of our approach to it is it's influenced by the market because they want you to go out and buy crap. They want you to go out and distract yourself. And like so all these things, instead of actually helping people, they're trying to push them to just buy more, purchase more. Maybe they're unhappy because they didn't take the trip. Maybe they're unhappy because they didn't get the new credit card. It's like instead of like actually like looking at yourself and asking, well, maybe things are too hectic. Maybe there's too much crap in my life. Maybe I need to downsize or, take time to do something else. Because I think the thing about simplicity too is like, I think sometimes when we focus more on the simple, that's when we get really good at things too. Because we narrow in on stuff and do it a lot, do it well. It makes life, I think, in a lot of ways, our days more consistent and manageable. And, we have a better sense of what to expect with simplicity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so like this whole I'm listening to this book right now. It's like it's one of those books that like you listen to and it just kind of changes. You have like a whole
They
mind
happen.
shift. Yeah, every once
Yeah.
in a while. It's called Feeling Great. It's by this guy. He also wrote a book called Feeling Good. I don't know what his name
Wait,
is.
it's called feeling what?
Feeling Great.
Okay.
And he
And
wrote
you
the
were
first
feeling
he
good
wrote
as well?
for like 20 years ago he wrote Feeling Good. And
Okay.
but it's like he he talks a whole bunch of stuff and he was talking about like anxiety and depression and they come based from this thought that I'm not good enough. And like as I
Yeah.
was listening to that, it just completely clicked because we live in a culture nowadays where like anxiety and depression are everywhere. But we live in a culture where nonstop you're getting messaged and marketed to nonstop everywhere you look. Billboards, TV ads, phone, Instagram, Facebook, everywhere that other people are better than you. And they're like,
Oh,
and,
dude.
and it's verifiable by photos because they have more money, they have better cars, their body looks better, their partners are better, their families are happier, everything. And it's just like you just have this nagging thought all day. I'm not good enough. I'm not keeping up. There's something
Well,
wrong with me. And it's like no wonder we have depression and anxiety.
yeah. Dude, because there's no way for everybody we focus on the 0.0001%, and there's no way, first of all, there's no way for everybody to live that way. It would be ridiculous. I mean, we wouldn't have enough supplies. Literally, we wouldn't have enough materials for everyone to live like that. It's so wasteful. But
Everybody
yeah, I
gets a
mean,
Lambo.
but yeah, right? Everybody. But you hear all these stories too. Like, you hear of like, I think Taylor Swift was recently in the news for using her jet so much, or like Elon Musk like using his personal jet to fly. Like, I think it was like twice a day some days, like because they'll take their jet for like a 30-minute flight. And it's like this just like almost for most people an unimaginable like wealth and excess. And it's idolized. And I think that is a huge problem. Like, like you can't just get a house. You want the biggest house and you want this, and it's like, and it just makes your life also more complicated and harder. But you're right. I think that's where like most of this depression and anxiety comes from. It's from this feeling of inadequacy, feeling of failure, because you can't measure up to everyone in the world. Nobody ever does. Like even before the internet, there was Einstein. Most other thinkers didn't measure up to Einstein, right? Like, but they didn't have to get it shoved in their face every day. Like every time they woke up, it was like, hey, here's a new paper, but like right in their face, like on a screen or something. And I think that's part of it. You could turn away from stuff back then.
Mhm.
Or you weren't just aware of it. Like it was some far off thing. Like you knew, like, I'm sure like people in the Middle Ages, they knew the king existed and had lots of stuff, but they didn't see him all the time, and they
Yeah.
weren't
They weren't
constantly
watching
like,
him nonstop,
yeah,
getting
they weren't
updates
constantly
every
turning
time
their
he
face.
gorged himself on whatever. Yeah. It's interesting because it happened to me today where like I've been lifting for a while, and so I'm getting a little bit bigger, and I'm like, all right, starting to get some muscle, and like
Then
so
you
I'm
saw
starting.
somebody larger than you.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I'm starting to get to the point where I'm not like the weakest person at the gym, and I'm like, yeah. And then this dude who's clearly on steroids, but just like jacked out of his freaking mind and zero body fat, he walks by, and like instantly, I felt just like inadequate. Like
He
moments
like picks
before, I
up the
was
bar you were lifting with like his pinky.
moments
He's like,
before I was
"Excuse me,
feeling like
sir."
awesome, and then he walked by and just like instantly felt inadequate. And I was just like, wow, that's crazy. But then I was thinking, there's always, no matter, he probably has the same like body dysmorphia as well. He walks
Yeah,
by and he sees
yeah,
some other dude who has something that he wants, and he just feels like completely worthless. And it's just like there's always going to be people who have what you don't have. So
yeah.
therein lies the value of simplicity and defining what's valuable to you.
When I started working out at Texas Tech, because I never worked out before, and this was in grad school, and I was working
Dude,
out with
I
a friend.
remember you went there like
Yeah.
skinny as a rail
Dude, I
and
weighed
came
about
back freaking
120. I
jacked.
weighed 120 when I went there. And then when I came, yeah, I was like 155 when I came back. So that's 35 pounds of just,
Yeah,
basically
that's
muscle. But
huge.
when I first went to the gym, because I'd never been, and I weighed like 120. Like I couldn't even lift the bar by itself, really.
Yeah.
Because like I had no stabilizer muscles, I never did. But there was one of my favorite things there was these two guys and they were there every time. I mean, we went 6 days a week and they were always there. And I one day asked them, and they were there like, because they were professional bodybuilders or whatever. That's what they did. But they were there like, they spent like 6 to 8 hours. That was their job. But they'd always be like looking in the mirror, the two of them, like looking at each other. It's so funny. But they were super nice. But it's just cracked up because it's like that's like I would see them, I'd be like, man, they are so huge. Those like they were ridiculous. But like, when I asked them, I was like, oh, that's because you're spending 8 hours a day. Like that's a lot. Most people cannot dedicate that time
Mhm.
because they're professionals. And I think that's what we forget too. We compare ourselves because it's so easy now. You can access so much information. It's so easy to compare yourself, but we're comparing ourselves. Really, it's such an unfair comparison we're making. We're making up comparisons to people that really have a totally different lifestyle than us, totally different life, or we don't know anything about them. And so, like, you know, yeah, they might be bigger than you or they might have more money, but you don't know what they're doing, what they went through, or anything. And, like, it makes it hard to make that comparison.
Yeah, I had like two moments in my life when I saw the how worthless it is to go after like money. So one when I was younger, there was this dude, Alex Becker, who at the time he was worth like 10 million. Now he's worth a lot more than that. But I followed him.
It
I learned how
tends to
to,
happen.
yeah,
Yeah.
I learned SEO from him. And just one day by random chance, I ran into him like downtown Dallas. I was there for a conference and just was walking by and I recognized his tattoo. I was just like blown away, completely starstruck. So like
First
I
millionaire.
I wanted to
Yeah.
talk his ear off. He wanted to leave as soon as possible. And
He's like,
like
God damn it.
yeah. But I asked him, I was because he was like I had never met a millionaire before in my life. So like and he's like worth 10 million or whatever. And so I was like, dude, what does it feel like to be rich? Because to me, this was like, this has got to be
Well,
the
this is the
coolest thing
goal,
ever.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
It's what you're
this,
trying
this would have
for.
solved in my mind, this would have solved every problem that I ever had, like happily ever after. I just need to be rich, and then it would be it. And he, like, without batting an eye, he was just like, it feels the same as it did to be broke. And I was,
Yeah.
my mind just like broke. I was just like, what?
Yeah.
How is that possible? You're rich. Like, but yeah, it's crazy. And then like Elon Musk, I read his, or I listened to his most recent biography. And in it, in the end of it, like the author asked him, he was like, what would you say to people who want to be the next Elon Musk? And he's like, careful what you wish for, because as nice as it all looks, it's not that great on the subjective experience of it.
Yeah,
And
because
so
he's still miserable, and
yeah.
like, well, it's funny. I went to my undergrad college. I don't know why, but it had like a lot of kids from really wealthy people for some reason. I'm not sure. I don't know what that reasoning was or why that happened, but like Tom, I knew Tom
Yeah.
Clancy's son there and all. We were friends. But it was funny because I noticed like I knew a few kids whose parents were worth like just insane amounts of money. Like Tom
Hmm.
Clancy at the time was worth quite a bit. I'm sure he's, it's more now, but whatever. But none of them were happy.
Hmm.
Like, like I mean, and these were kids who had like they had platinum credit cards that they could literally go buy, I mean, literally they could go buy anything and it would just get paid for, no questions asked. Like, really most people's dream, right? And they were totally miserable. Like
Hmm.
all of them, had so
Yeah.
many problems. Like, and it's it makes you realize that it's just not, that is not the solution. Yes, and when you're, and I get it, because like when you're broke, because I've been there and in debt, like, m money seems like it'll solve everything, and it seems appealing, but the reality is like, yes, it'll solve those immediate problems, but you still have you to deal with.
Hmm.
You have to deal with that too. And most people, I think, as they earn money, they just use it as a way to ignore themselves more and more. And then it just gets worse and worse. The problem compounds.
Hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting mind experiment because like for a lot of people, we were talking about this earlier, how like, they just buy stuff to make themselves feel better. And that's kind of how the whole business cycle works because they just convince us
Yeah.
that if we buy stuff, we'll feel better. And we just go out and buy stuff and it temporarily does make us feel better. It scratches that itch. But like, if you just imagine that you have all the money in the world and then you can just go buy everything, well, sure, then you buy everything. But then all of a sudden, it just loses its luster because you're like, I keep buying stuff and it's not filling that void. Like,
Yeah, it's
what's
not
going
doing
on?
anything, right? It
Yeah.
just makes you feel worse after a while. And you have no, yeah, the stuff has no real attachment to you at all because it doesn't matter. None of it matters. It's like
Hmm.
almost like it makes things meaningless
Hmm.
in a
Oh,
way.
totally.
Yeah, it is crazy though. It's crazy, it always blew my mind because you also see how like I think like that striving after money, it's like such an addiction because you see like these people, you can just I mean you can anybody can look up, like all these people like were younger and like had a breakout business, they got lucky, something big, especially like the dot-com boom and stuff. They make a ton of money from selling it. And like most like any normal person I think would like stop at that point, but they don't because it's like an addiction. It's like now you have to go do something else to make more money, to get more money, but like
Hmm.
you can't use it all.
Well, dude, it's workaholism, no different from
Yeah,
alcoholism or any
it
other
is.
addiction.
Yeah.
Like people are just addicted to it, and because it feels good. But
Well, it does. I get
yeah.
it. Like it's like you can attach your value very easily. It's very easy to attach our value to external things like our achievements, our wealth, because they're measurable, right? Like you can look and say, I have X number of dollars, or I have X number of worth, or I've accomplished those things, and it feels good. But like at the same time, that's not really, you know, you.
Yeah. Here's another thought that I had while listening to that book. It's been making me think a whole bunch. Because, like, like a
Well,
lot
that's
of
good.
people, when they set out on their goals to earn all this wealth, they have an idea of what it'll do. Like, maybe when they were in elementary school or something, people talk down to them or beat them up or whatever it is. And all of a sudden they're like, I'm going to be the richest person ever because then they'll respect me. Or they make up something like that. And then they get all the money. And guess what? Those people don't care.
Yeah.
And so like their whole like they never get that feeling of satiety from accomplishing it. It's just a goal that just never gets fulfilled.
Well, it's funny too because I think that's one of the worst things we do too is like you're trying to prove something to somebody else, but most of the time those other people don't give a shit about
They don't
it.
care.
They don't have time. They don't even care. You're not even on their radar. So
Yeah.
that's yeah, it's like making comparisons outside of ourselves and then also like wanting others to notice us, not gonna work.
I experienced that so hardcore this past week because like I just failed an exam big time. And it was a
Happens.
very like I put a lot of value on passing this exam, even though it was like almost impossible. But and so I was so conscious of how other people would judge me because I didn't pass the exam. And then I was like sitting around one day and I was like, nobody's gonna even care. Like there are a
Nope.
few people who there are a few like you and my brother would probably be supportive, but like most people just won't even care. Like they'll be like, "So
No.
did you take that exam?" I'll be like, "Oh yeah, I failed it." And they'd be like, "Oh yeah, so I just went to a concert this weekend," and like they'll
Yeah.
just go on about themselves. Like nobody
Because
cares.
it happens.
Yeah.
Because it happens. And like, and it's not also, I think stuff like that too, where like we think people will care. It's not something like if you were getting treated for cancer or something, like yeah, people would care if the treatment went well or not because you're talking about like your life. But this is like it's a test. You know what I mean? Like yeah, it's cool. Like I hoped you would have passed, but like at the same time, it's like it's not the end of the world either. You can always redo it.
Hmm.
You can do a do-over or take a mulligan, as they say, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that's also part of it is we start to like overvalue these things or think they matter so much. And I think that's a good point too, is we also think that other people see us in the same way that we see ourselves in relation to their successes and failures, and they really just don't. It's like the embarrassment thing, like when you do something that's embarrassing at a restaurant or something and people see you and you feel like everyone's looking at you. But the reality is no one remembers it Or at best, if they do, they tell the story incorrectly and probably get you totally wrong in it, you know? Like
Yeah. Yeah. I have
it's
another experience of that where like I always hate when I have to go and say I'm sorry. Like even when I'm wrong, I'm just like, oh gosh, I of course I have to go and say I'm sorry. And then like
but
somebody
I'm
will say
never
that,
wrong.
yeah, and then somebody will say they're sorry to me, and I'm just like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. But it's like
Yeah.
that's probably the same exact experience that they're doing when I'm going through all
Oh,
this like
dude.
mental turmoil to go say sorry to them. And they're
I
just
do
like,
that
yeah,
all the
whatever, it
time with
doesn't
stuff.
matter.
Like, dude, anything like especially like anything with like interpersonal relationships, like I'll stress about it so much. And then it's like, but the reality is if you just do it and get it over with, like it always makes it better. Because
Hmm.
even if it's something bad, it's out in the open and it's easier to deal with, you know?
Hmm.
And I think that that works with simplicity too. It's just simple, just doing things, getting them, simplifying, you know?
Hmm.
Making things easier for yourself and stop stressing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
We're
also
good
like
at
a lot.
complicating stuff.
Oh my gosh, goodness, yeah. Also, so like a lot of stuff we talked about is helpful from kind of in simplifying, kind of determining what your values are, what's important to you, and stop trying to do everything because you
You know what's
just
fun?
can't. Yeah.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. Like I used to write down like well, I still do, but like my goals and stuff. And then I started thinking about like what does happiness really look like? What does like a good future really look like to me? And when I was younger, I think like everybody else, because I think everybody else at the time too, like, you know, if you had asked me like what do you want when you grow up? Like I would have said like, oh, I want a big house, I want like nice cars and stuff. And it's funny because now I look back at my notebook at like what I say, and it's like I want a smallish house, not like tiny, but like, you know, not huge, because that's just more crap to take care of and rooms to fill up, which I know amounts to more stuff I don't want or need, you know?
Hmm.
And like some land and like kind of far away, you know what I mean? Like it's not fabulous or glamorous because I don't really want that. And like I don't really, and like, and I think people don't think of that either. Like they might idolize like Elon Musk or like these celebrities and stuff, but like, do you really want people to be taking photos of you all the time, for everything you do to be scrutinized online, for
Yeah.
every move you make to be registered and checked boxed and whatever, you know? I mean, yeah,
Yeah, you can't go
crazy.
anywhere without people like I remember one time my family was having breakfast the same place and Lou Ferrigno was also having breakfast, the Hulk.
Oh, nice.
And
That's
dude,
awesome.
and so like we kept looking out over at him. Everybody else in the restaurant was looking at him.
And
And it's
he's
just
probably
like
hard to
the
miss,
man was
right?
just trying to eat in peace and everybody's literally just looking at him and then going to get autographs and like pictures and all this stuff. And it's just
And they
like,
can be, and like some of
yeah.
those guys, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, some of the celebrities are super nice about it too. Like they understand the situation and they're polite, but at the same time, it's gotta be annoying as hell, right? Like, yeah, and like they also, and it's gotta be tough too, because like, especially like actors, like they know like their wealth is dependent upon their being liked. So, like, you want to be nice, but at the same time, it's like you also are living a life, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah, there was
Plus,
a really
dude,
good movie with Ray Romano and Eminem, and it was like a story, but it was them talking as if they were the real person, like their actual person. And so Eminem was just talking about how terrible it was to be as famous as he was, because he's like, dude, I can't even go to Walmart. Like,
no, you can't do
I'm
anything.
just stuck at home. I can't do anything. And yeah,
You
it's
have to have
crazy.
people go out and shop for you and stuff. You
Yeah.
can't do things that normal people do because it's like that would create a huge, you know, scene basically everywhere you go.
Hmm.
And like, you know, you can try, and if you try to hide yourself, that makes it probably even worse because then people are like, is that him? Like trails of people following you. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny.
Cool.
Too
So,
much.
anyways, that's pretty much it in terms of the art of simplicity. We didn't really talk about it too much, but we talked about it a little bit,
We should live
and
simple.
maybe we talked about why excess is bad,
Yeah.
and then you can figure
That
out the
also,
counterfactual to
yeah,
that. Yeah, there
there you
you
go.
go.
That's the right way to look at
So,
it.
if you enjoyed it, like the episode, we have hundreds of episodes you can listen to. So, if you're
Yeah,
going on a
literally.
car ride somewhere, you just want to download a whole bunch of podcasts, go for it and check us out every week. This is the Existential Stoic Podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. I'll see you later, Danny.
Later, Andy.